Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some big time conference matchups. We had Ohio State kind of handling Illinois just a little bit. Oklahoma gets a rock fight of a win against Texas this weekend. I think Michigan gets a massive one out there in LA and a couple other ones that are going to be huge for the CFP race down the stretch. But let's get into a little week 7 whip around, a number of games that we got to talk about really quickly. But before we get into the games, we got something to talk about that is going on in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. There's a lot of talk about Bill Belichick right now. I don't know what's going on in Chapel Hill. They have released two statements, him and Bubba Cunningham, that were not inspiring. I'll put it that way, at least for the time being. The question is, how does this all end? At least in my opinion. At this point, it's just how does it all go down, not does it go down. I think it's going to happen at some point this season. UNC is investigating different recruiting violations around the team. Bill Belichick apparently has come to the board of trustees, has come to the athletic director and the president and said he might be willing to pay the $1 million buyout to find a place to land with another team or on media. Obviously, that would not be difficult for Bill Belichick to pull off if he was to leave the coaching world, but it's been bad. And a number of things have gone poorly over there. It doesn't sound like the staff is really kind of connected right now in some respects. It sounds like a lot of guys have lost track of Bill in some respects over the bye week. It has not been going well. Is pretty much the long and short of that. I think it's coming to an end this year. I think I talked about it, I believe, on Tuesday. I think we're heading towards UNC being kind of a trivia question. At the end of the year, Bill Belichick, where did he coach in 2025? And everyone's going to be wondering what it is. I think it's going to that territory. It has been bad from the jump. I don't think it's getting better. I think they're going to lose a number of games. And at the end of the year, he's going to find his way out one way or another. The UNC is going to find their way out one way or another. It's been messy from the jump, and it's not getting prettier by the day. Number 24, South Florida at North Texas. This one's huge. This is a special Friday night game, and when you look at the American right now, it is as interesting of a conference as you're going to find in the entire country. You have South Florida, obviously, getting a lot of the headlines. Memphis, Tulane, being those big-time teams. North Texas played about as good a football as just about anyone in the country. Drew Mestemaker in that passing offense has been as good as any in the country, I think, at this point. USF obviously has had a couple of those big time wins and is looking to kind of get a little bit of a flag plant in the American. I think this would be a huge win for them to start off everything, kind of move them into that top spot once again, with some huge games against Memphis, against Navy on the coming up later in the year. But I think it's going to be a really fun matchup all the way down the road to the American title. I think this could be a rematch at the very end of the year, but I'm going to take South Florida to kind of control this game, be able to run the football and at least take the ball away once from Drew Mestemaker. I'll take South Florida to win this one, but I think it's a really, really fun one over there in Denton, Texas. Pitt at number 25, Florida State. This one's an interesting one for a number of reasons. Florida State starts the season beating Alabama, feels all the confidence in the world. They've lost the last two to Virginia and Miami. That's one thing. It's a totally other thing to fall to 500, losing to two teams that you probably didn't have circled as losses before the season in Virginia and Pitt. And the question is, you got a new freshman quarterback coming in for Pitt, Mason Heinschel. I hope I got that right. He took over for Eli Holstein last week, and he rolled over Boston College. Went for 323, got 4 passing touchdowns. Eli Holstein actually came up in mop-up duty. That's how ugly that game got. So Pitt's in a really good position now. What does that freshman look like on the road is a big-time question here. There's no doubt about that, but Florida State needs this one really badly. You can't fall to 500 after that big-time win over Bama, and I tend to believe they won't. I think they get to I think they get to the young quarterback enough in this game. I think they attack on the defensive side of the ball, and Florida State does enough to win this game. I think it's going to be relatively close, but I think they find a way to pull this one off and at least move to 4-2, not a 3-3 start for a team that really came out of the gate swinging. Virginia Tech at number 13, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech favored by 14.5 here. This one's interesting. There's a number of different things that could happen here. Virginia Tech's 2-1 since Brent Pry was let go. They've kind of gotten their offense going just a little bit throughout the last little bit. Kyron Jones has gotten a little bit more confident. Georgia Tech coming off a bye, so you get Haynes King healthy, which is about as important of a thing for this team as anything. Both these teams are going to be running their quarterback quite a bit. I can almost promise you that. But the big time question here is Virginia Tech's been really good against the run. There's no doubt about that. They've been one of the better teams against the run. The one team that was able to get after them a little bit is West Virginia, and that's going to be probably the best rushing attack you have faced. until this game. I think it's going to be a battle for them to face. And then Virginia Tech has given the ball away a couple of times. And Clayton Powell, Amari Harvey, all the guys on the back end for Georgia Tech can make a number of winning plays. So I think Georgia Tech does enough to get this done. I think it's a little bit sketchy at halftime possibly, but they make enough defensive plays in the second half to win this one. Notre Dame continues rolling on with a huge one against NC State this weekend. They're favored by 21.5. This one's really interesting. They try to find their way to 10-2, and they got USC on the horizon. But CJ Bailey's a really good athlete, and he's a guy that can force a lot of issues for you very quickly if you do not make the proper plays in this football game if you're Notre Dame. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting. I think both teams have the ability to put up some points. Here's the problem with NC State. They haven't been able to stop the pass at all. And if CJ Carr is going to play confident in this football game, he is going to pick you apart. I'm just being totally honest. I think this one might get a little bit ugly pretty early. I think Notre Dame's able to open this one up and get a big-time win here. Now, I think it's going to be a little bit of a battle. I think they go back and forth offensively in this game just a little bit, but I think CJ Carr is going to have too many openings to not take advantage, and Notre Dame's able to get a big-time win here. Arkansas at number 12, Tennessee. One of those games is kind of a little bit overshadowed, but this is a revenge spot for Tennessee. Last year, obviously, went into Fayetteville and had that fourth down that kind of got away from them just a little, got away from Nico just a little bit at the end of the game, but a new Tennessee team in so many different ways going into this game. Kind of a weird game over at Mississippi State where you score 2 defensive touchdowns, you give the ball away a couple of times, you let Mississippi State come back into it, and you win it in overtime, but you definitely walk out of that game with a number of things to fix, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and you got a really athletic Taylor Green coming into town. So those edge rushers are going to be massive in this football game. They got to find a way to keep him at bay just a little bit. Tyree West, Joshua Josephs are going to be huge in this football game just to kind of keep that guy from running wild because he can make all types of plays and he can force all types of problems for you if you're not able to keep him in the pocket. I really like Tennessee. I think they're going to continue to get more healthy, continue to make big-time plays. I think the offense is going to kind of explode in this game the way that a lot of teams have against Arkansas, and I think they're going to slowly get more healthy. Jermod McCoy hopefully coming back for the Bama game, but something to watch over the next week or so. It's going to be a huge game for Tennessee. I think they're just too much offense for Arkansas to keep up with at the end of the day. Florida at number 5, Texas A&M. This is a really interesting one as well for a number of reasons, mainly because is the Florida that we got last week the Florida that we're getting going forward? Because if that's the case, this team can do a lot of damage to the SEC that they're probably not making the playoff. They're almost definitely not making the playoff. I feel pretty confident saying that. But at the end of the day, if that's the Florida that we get going forward, they can mess up A&M season. They can mess up an Alabama season or LSU or some team down the road. Obviously, they already lost LSU, but a couple of teams down the road that they're playing. Georgia absolutely is a team that they can really compete with if they're able to continue just leaning on Jaden Baugh. Jaden Baugh is your best player on your football team. He is as talented of a running back as just about anyone not named Ahmad Hardy in this conference. He is going to be a nightmare to deal with, plain and simple. And I think there's going to be an opening here where can Florida State or Florida just lean on them just a little bit? Because that Texas offensive line or defensive line, really struggled against this group. A&M's been a little bit better against the run since the first week. This will be by far their biggest challenge. There's no doubt about that. And I think this is going to be a group when Jaden Baugh and that running attack that could force some issues. And then can DJ Lagway have a little bit of time? Because this Texas A&M pass rush with Cassius Howell has been absolutely nasty. I think it's going to be really fun. I think they go back and forth just a little bit. Can you give Marcel Reed time? Because this Florida State defensive line got after Texas offensive line. Now it's a much better group for Texas A&M, at least on paper right now. So I think this one's going to go back and forth a little bit. I think A&M just has too much offensively to get this one. I think it's going to be a lot of big plays downfield. I think DJ Lagway makes a couple of plays that make us feel confident in him moving forward, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think A&M's got the run game to win this one. I think they make a couple of plays downfield, and A&M, the Aggies, are able to continue to roll on to a possible SEC title and definite CFP berth. Kansas at number 9, Texas Tech. Texas Tech favored by 14.5 in this game. Their kind of death march through the Big 12 continues. They got a new logo coming in next year, so that'll be an interesting thing to watch. A lot of hysteria around that logo, but at the end of the day, this is going to be really interesting because Kansas has an ability here. They have an opening here where you have a Texas Tech team that's come off 2 really intense wins over Utah and then at Houston, where a lot of people, including myself, were questioning their ability to totally blow out that team. They've done both those things. They have at Arizona State next week. there's an opening here. And Jalen Daniels can do so many things off schedule that maybe he can hold that defensive line just a little bit longer than they have in the rest of the matchups. Maybe David Bailey doesn't get after him every single snap the way he seemingly has for every single Big 12 matchup thus far. I think Texas Tech is able to win this one. I think it's going to be a little bit closer. I think some people see a couple of chinks in the armor for Texas Tech by the end of the year. I think it's one of those games that just you catch someone sleeping just a little bit in the first half. I don't necessarily think Texas Tech's going to look terrible in this game, but I do think there's going to be enough of an opening where we have maybe a 10-point Texas Tech win at the end of this one, not a 25-point the way that we've had early on in the Big 12 schedule. Finally, number 18 BYU outside top 25 Arizona, a very interesting team in Arizona who's done a number of nice things as they've gotten into Big 12 play, have taken a little bit of step back, especially offensively, but this is going to be a really interesting one. There's no doubt about that. It's going to be one of those teams that you probably haven't watched too much in BYU, and makes some sense. There haven't been those major marquee matchups for the Cougars quite yet, but Bear Bachmeier has been playing really good football for them. The true freshman quarterback, very tough kid that can make all types of throws, very talented. They're going on the road for a very interesting matchup against no Fafita in the Arizona offense that is sort of finding a groove, has kind of fallen into a little bit of a lull with the conference performances, but is a little bit hit or miss at times. Either Noah Fafita is making a big play downfield or they're getting a little bit hung up. They're going 3 and out. They're turning over the football. It looks a little bit all over the place. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they can do against a BYU team that is just steady as can be. They have been since last year. They continue to be that. They make all the right plays. They win the margins the way that a lot of teams, especially now in college football, just don't. I think this is one of those moments where the BYU defense steps up in a big-time way. They make enough plays, and Bear Bachmeier maybe doesn't play his best football on Saturday night, but they do enough to win this game. Arizona continues to kind of tumble just a little bit in conference play, and BYU continues to be one of those teams that you're just watching out of the corner of your eye in the Big 12 because they could wreak a lot of havoc later in the season. But I think it's a really fun slate of games. There's so many games that you have those marquee matchups. You have the 3 ranked matchups, of course, and then you have those USC Michigan. You have Texas Oklahoma. You have Arizona State Utah that can just be so important when you talk about the CFP race down the road. And then you just got chaos the rest of the way. You got Pitt at Florida State. Absolutely could be a Pitt win. Virginia Tech upsets Georgia Tech and totally changes the ACC. There's a number of things that can happen this upcoming weekend. Maybe Florida continues to hold serve and continues to kind of surge as a football team. And then you're looking up as them as a possible, I don't want to say CFP team, but a possible team that could mess up a whole lot of other CFP teams the rest of the way. So I think it's going to be really fun. I think it's one of those weekends that we know going in it's going to be crazy, and it might even exceed expectations even with that. But we'll talk about it all as it unfolds. Let's get to our last segment here in a second. We'll get into my best bets for this upcoming week.